Clear articulation allows you to advocate for yourself, express your needs, set boundaries, and move through life with less friction. You're not here for the same old, same old. You're not here for just tips. You're here because something in you knows it's time to change. Not just how you lead, but how you live. I'm Janet Aioli, and this is The Inner Edge, a podcast about leadership, self-mastery, resilience, and reinvention for a new world era. Real life, whole self, let's go there. Welcome to The Inner Edge. Welcome back to The Inner Edge. The ability to articulate your thoughts clearly is not just a leadership skill, it's a life skill. It determines whether you're understood at work, at home, when you're in an argument or in conflict, and in pretty much all the decisions that shape your future. It affects how you advocate for yourself. It affects how you set boundaries, how you influence outcomes. I can go on and on. It affects how seriously people take what you say. So you can be intelligent, insightful, and experienced, and still not be heard. Because how you communicate is how people receive your message. When your thoughts, and I know we've all been there, come out tangled, you haven't thought something through, you run on and on and on and ramble, they're overly complex or unfocused, your ideas and what you're going to say loses power. So today's episode, and this comes up a lot and people have asked me to talk about this, which is why I'm using this episode today to talk about this topic, is about why learning to articulate your thoughts clearly, succinctly, and intentionally is one of the most underestimated skills in both leadership and life, and why mastering it changes everything. So first of all, let's regroup and think about why this is so important. Because, I'm always talking about the inner, and this is really an outer, but it's really taking your inner world and it's bringing it outside. And people they're not in your head. They don't know what you're thinking. And so when you're articulating, and we are articulating things that are jumbled, people can't follow the thought train. And the brilliant idea isn't really heard. We're living in an era of overload. Think about this. Think about how much stuff is coming at us constantly. Social media, on TV, and around us. Now we have so much at our fingertips. All we do is look at our phone and there's just so much information. Our attention is fragmented. So we have short attention spans. Meetings when we're at work are rushed. People are scanning, they're hurrying. I've got meeting after meeting after meeting. So what people are doing is they're scanning, and we're all doing this, for clarity. Research consistently shows that clear communications is one of the strongest predictors of leadership effectiveness. Studies highlighted in Harvard Business Review show that leaders who communicate concisely are perceived as more confident, competent, and trustworthy, regardless of their actual expertise. And we know this. We know if somebody can talk a good game, they're seen as someone who is an expert and an authority. Now, do I condone this? Do I like this? No, but it's a reality. And so this is really important to master, especially if you have a lot of substance and a lot of really great ideas that you want to put out there. Organizational research also shows that people who ramble or over-explain are often perceived as less certain, even when they're highly capable. And neuroscience tells us something similar. When information is too complex or poorly structured, the brain just disengages. People don't lean in when they're confused. What they do is tune out. So clear articulation is how your thinking becomes influence. And it's how insight becomes action. and it's how your intentions become impactful. One of the biggest misconceptions I see, especially among thoughtful, high-achieving leaders, is the belief that saying more will help people understand. That, oh, if I explain it, like they'll go into meetings with executives and they'll have slide after slide after slide, but I've got to tell them more, but they don't understand. More words rarely equal clarity. Often the opposite is true. When communication feels muddy or too much coming at me, it's usually not because you don't know enough. It's because you know too much and you haven't been able to distill what matters most to others. And clarity, being clear, requires restraint. It requires choice. It requires knowing what not to say. And that's really hard. And so many of us, capable people, struggle with clarity for many human reasons. We're afraid of being misunderstood. We want to sound credible. We want to sound intelligent. We know our stuff. There's so much stuff. How do I give it all to you? We're emotionally activated. Or it could be that we know so much stuff and we don't yet know exactly what our point is. How do we distill that? None of this means that we're ineffective. It means we're human. But leadership requires intentional communication, as does communicating with other people, not reactive communication and not just spilling whatever is in our brain. So on the inner edge, we always come back to presence. I mean, that's what we talk about all the time. And we talk about really presence from the inside out. But clear articulation isn't just a language or an image skill. It's an inner skill. When you're grounded, emotionally regulated, and self-aware, your communication is sharper because clarity comes from trusting your thinking, honoring what matters, and being willing to land your point and being aware of what others are looking for, not just what's in your head. When you don't articulate clearly, your ideas will be overlooked, your authority gets diluted, and your intentions get misread. And this is all happening in snap moments. And so over time, this affects more than work. It seeps into life, and it's also becomes how people see you. People who struggle to articulate often feel misunderstood in relationships. Think about how many times you've replayed conversations in your heads and it's like, that's not what I meant. That's not what I meant. It's because people aren't in your head. And the way you're conveying the message could be how you're being misunderstood. We may silence ourselves or over-explain in order to be understood. And what that does, it actually conveys lack of confidence because we're not really effective at expressing what we really mean. So this is how capable, smart people lose credibility, not loudly, but quietly, by repeatedly not being able to articulate their message in an impactful and influential way. So the most important rule of clear communication is knowing your point before you speak. Not your topic, not your background, your point. So ask yourself these questions when you're trying to make your point. What am I really trying to say? What do I want this person to understand? What do I want to be different after I speak? What do I want people to do differently? If you can't answer those questions simply, your listener won't either. And so what I'm doing right now actually is my point is how you articulate in communication matters, and it matters in leadership and it matters in life. And so learning how to articulate clearly will have a big impact on your influence and it will have a big impact on your credibility. That's what I'm trying to get you to hear in this, even in this podcast today. So really, first, lead with the headline. Don't make people work for your point. Orient them quickly. You notice at the very beginning, I said what I was going to talk about and why it was important. Second, speak in shorter, complete thoughts. Here's the thing. Because we're thinking in our mind, we tend to use, and you just start to notice this, longer sentences. And we add in words like and but and or to compress our thoughts, but they go on run on when people are hearing it. So shorter sentences create impact. Third, tailor your message to the person you're speaking with. Clarity has to do with context. What works in one audience may confuse another. And I see this all the time. I have certain messages that I like to convey, especially around less ego, more soul, and around presence. But I find that when I'm talking to a group of, for example, creatives, I will convey the message differently than when I'm talking to a group of engineers. And with the engineers, I need to be a lot more succinct. I need to be a lot more clear, step by step, paint the picture. Whereas with the creatives, I can be more conceptual. And so keep that in mind as well whenever you're trying to articulate clearly. And some of the hardest moments to communicate clearly are when we're in emotionally charged situations, where we're in conflict, when we're giving feedback, when we're having high stakes conversations. And I know you can imagine this, right? So whenever you're in a fight with your significant or other, or you're giving someone feedback, the words are emotionally charged. And so it's really hard to communicate clearly. When emotions rise, clarity drops. So what's most critical is pausing, slowing down, and regulating your nervous system before you speak. You don't need to say everything that comes to your head because those are the things you regret later. You need to say what matters. So let's make this practical, a practical clarity practice to sum all of this up. Before important conversations, when you're going to convey something in a meeting or in with a significant other or in a relationship, write down my main point in one sentence. What is my main point? Why does it matter? And what do I want from this conversation? Now that's critical, okay? 3 things: main point, why it matters, what do I want from this conversation? This simple practice can really transform how you're received. Learning to articulate clearly isn't really about sounding so polished all the time. It's about being aligned. Clear articulation allows you to advocate for yourself, express your needs, set boundaries, and move through life with less friction, with less being in your head and more impact. It's not just a professional advantage, it's a human one. So if you've ever walked away from a conversation thinking, that's not what I meant, no, you're not lacking intelligence, you're not lacking ideas. You need to refine this skill. Clear communication is how you honor your thinking and respect your listener. It's how you turn all your insights and your ideas into influence at work and in life. And clarity is part of your inner edge.